Hi everyone, my name is Chris Pankow, and I'm putting together a series of videos that you're going to be able to use as a resource when working through some of the hurdles that you're going to encounter when you're working with clay. So these are some of the tools that I've chosen that are necessary to get started with. So there's a lot of tools that you can have in the clay when you're working with clay, but these are some of the important ones that you're going to need right off the bat. So first you're going to need is a bucket. Now this bucket would be your throwing bucket that you're going to be having at your wheel. So that's really important. I think a 5-gallon pail is always really important to have. And you can put your slop in there, you can put your scraps in there. A nice tight-fitting lid on one of these is also a really handy tool. You're going to want a sponge. So you could get, these are very typical style sponge, cheap sponge. I tend to like one of the Elfinier sponges. I don't have one here with me, but that's a good one too. You're going to want sort of a cleanup towel. This is to just wipe your hands with and dry your hands off. And any old towel will do. Another thing I like to have is if you go to a secondhand store or if you have an old set of bed sheets, that's a really good thing to have. You can rip them up into different sizes and use them to cover your work when you're not working on it, or if you have to let it sit, and it allows it to dry more evenly and or slowly if need be. Also some plastic. I like to use thinner plastic. This garbage bag is fine, but if you have those really thick garbage bags, you want something that can sort of wrap and drape over things. Now here's some of the tools that I'm going to recommend that you start with. So a lot of these tools will come in sort of a starter kit that you could get at a ceramic supply store or the bookstore or someplace like that. So there's the wooden knife here, very handy tool, use it all the time. It's got two ends on it, sort of a rounded end and a pointy end. This is a fettling knife, use it all the time for many things. Here we have a couple very generic style trimming tools. You're going to need a couple of these. These two here are very typical. You often see these two shapes used in a lot of situations. Needle tool, very important. This is sort of a commercial aftermarket rib. Mud Tools makes it, and they have all different styles of ribs. But a shape like this is a really handy shape. So get something like that. We have the wooden rib with sharpened edges, very handy. This one here is a serrated rib. It's a kidney-shaped rib, and it's got a bunch of little teeth on it. This is really great for scratching and doing a lot of things. You're going to see like attaching handles and so on and so forth. Very handy thing. And then the metal kidney-shaped rib. Very useful, handy rib to have. It's a must-have in the toolkit. Another thing you're going to want to have is the cut-off wire. This is how you're going to remove things from the wheel and also cut into your clay and partition it out. This is kind of not absolutely necessary right off the bat, but very handy to have. Calipers, great when you start getting into lids or if you want to size things to be a similar size. Great thing to have. Get a couple different kinds of brushes. Always good to have a bunch of old brushes. Cleanup sponge. Now this is really important. Make sure you get a couple cleanup sponges. You should always have a cleanup sponge around. And this is really important because clay is really messy business. You're going to get, especially when you're starting out, everything's going to get dirty. It's going to be clay on everything. If you want your tools to last, and if you don't want to get sick and maybe develop silicosis or something like that, you always want to make sure that your surface area is cleaned and your tools are cleaned after you use them. So a cleanup sponge is really great for wiping things down. I'm always going to be wearing an apron in the studio because clay on your clothes makes dust, and the clay dust is actually really hazardous. I mentioned silicosis. Well, that is caused by silica, which is in clay, and when it's airborne, those little particles go into your lungs when you're breathing, and they scar your lung tissue, and causes silicosis, and you could actually die from it. So don't get silicosis. And then spray bottle, always a great thing to have to spray things down. And then a mop. So you always want to know, if you're working in a school studio, always know where the mops are kept, or where you could fill mop water. And if you have your own studio, make sure you get a mop. You want to try to avoid making dust at all costs. So sweeping, if you could avoid sweeping, that's great. Try the wet mop technique, and you're going to be much better off for it, and have a healthy studio. Okay, let's get started.